one thing that I was thinking about or that I was writing was how like a year, because again, like I feel like August is a time of like years for me in many senses, where it was like August when I moved to New York post grad. Last August is when I moved to Brooklyn and started that chapter. And I was thinking about how like even now sitting here, like even just like staying with you the past 2 days, it's like a year ago this wasn't even a possible. This wasn't even like an idea, or like I could never envisioned it because we didn't become friends until like November. I feel like October was when we sat down for the first time and like talked, and then hung out like a month later. So really, we've been friends for less than a year, which is pretty crazy to say.
Yeah, it is crazy. Um, yeah, it's because I couldn't have imagined this because we hadn't really known each other yet. Same with like all this other stuff that's going on too, with like going back to school to teach and then starting school to learn too. I feel like it's for me it's like a chapter of like things that I could not have definitely not anticipated last year.
Yeah, and I guess like that. I mean, I would want to hear about that. Like, take the time to reflect on your past year, but like just like random side note. I remember like when we would like we would bump shoulders basically for like a moment and be like, "Oh, what's up, dude?
Yeah, I know.
How's it going?" Like, because I would be with one of our mutual friends, and be like, "Oh, what's up, dude? How's it going?" And like that's literally the extent of our conversations.
Yeah, it was one of those. I feel like one of those relationships where like knew each other through mutual people. So every time that we ran into each other, it was that interaction and like
Yeah,
didn't really have the time to talk that much, but also didn't really have a reason to either as much.
yeah, exactly.
And then I feel like once I had like heard through the grapevine that you were making YouTube videos and quit your banking job, I was like, oh, that's sick. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty bold. Like
Yeah.
I wonder what's going on there. And then, yeah, I guess just happened to luck into sitting next to each other during that dinner.
Yeah, no, and then like a random side note where it's like, I guess like most people would think about like you would say like, oh, I know this person. Like in that sense, I've known you since like 2020, senior year at college. Like when I would go over to our like mutual friends
But
place.
didn't you say that you came to our dorm
Like-
on 2017?
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. Even then, like I've known of you since freshman year of college, which is 2017.
Yeah.
Because I literally remember being in a room with like you and like a bunch of other people and like our mutuals for like a pregame. So since 2017, then like the first time like sort of sitting with you was 2020, and like I feel like most people would say like, oh, I've known him since then, but we didn't really know each other until last year,
Yeah.
and we've only known each other since then, which is less than a year.
Yeah. I feel like the first time we hung out, we got to know each other very well because I was just like, I remember that was very refreshing for me because I don't think I'd had a one-on-one like that in a while where like we just met up and just like talked straight for like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And then afterwards I was like exhausted, but like in a good way.
Yeah.
'Cause we'd had a long
Likewise.
ass conversation.
Yeah. No, I definitely felt the same way where it was like I hadn't had, and I think I told you about this. Like I wrote about this like afterwards. I was like I hadn't had a conversation like that in like my entire like life, or since I guess like I'm like version 2.0, like being more authentic. I hadn't had a conversation like that. Like I had like moments where I thought they were like more meaningful, but in compare and like not to compare, but like comparing to ours, I was like none of these hold a candle or like even match up to that.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of that.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. I feel like I'm at a loss
You're
for
lost
words for a moment.
Yeah. Well, I guess like in that, like I guess like pausing there for a second. I guess like what we were saying before this was like for you to reflect on the past year.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I think because I think it's important as much as like, you know, we can in our heads think about it, but like to actually like say it out loud and like, you know, I guess like memorialize it or.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of big changes externally, which I think came to be through like big changes internally. But I mean, definitely like a year ago to date would not have fathomed that it would have been possible to like be both beginning like a teaching career and also like starting my master's and like something I'm interested in. Because those are kind of things I think that I like kind of like fantasized about or like dreamed about in my head,
Yeah.
but I was like, oh, it's not realistic right now, and then kind of like broke down that mental barrier and like made it real, like very like questioned why it wasn't realistic, and then kind of made it happen. Um, and then I think one big change is like I feel like I did not like talking about my job at all out of college
Yeah.
or my career. And it was like kind of a point of like internal conflict where like I think sometimes it just made me uncomfortable and I didn't really know why. And now it's definitely not the case where like I want to talk about what
Yeah.
I'm doing and like why I'm there. Um, yeah, which is that's a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, a few thoughts there, but like, I was the same way where, and we've talked about this, where like when people would ask me like what I do, I'd be like, oh yeah, I do finance. Like when I first graduated from school.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, what finance? And I would like quickly say it and like try to redirect the conversation as fast as possible, which is like not a great sign because it's like if your job or like your career, but whatever you want to call it, takes up so much of your life and you're not excited to talk about it, I feel that's a glaring red flag for like the rest of the areas of your life if you're not excited in that huge one. But it's like also, I guess what day is it? The 27th? I guess where were you like literally and figuratively a year ago?
27th.
And what I mean by like, I guess like where you were in your life. I mean, I mean, not place wise, but like where you were in your life and like how you were feeling, like your sentiment towards like the future and whatnot.
I mean, physically, I was probably in my old apartment, which was
All right.
yeah, my childhood home before probably like 2 months out from moving out forever. Um, Mentally, I feel like I was probably like chilling at this point of time where like it was summer and like still enjoying nice weather and stuff. I just think that like my priority was definitely on social life and kind of feeling that if I could like lock that down and be proud of that, that like the kind of job stuff wouldn't matter as much maybe without seeing that like both bleed into one another.
Yeah.
So I would say like I think I was like fine overall. I was just not super excited for like work.
Yeah.
I think the big changes kind of really started happening once I like realized I wasn't excited for it, thought about it, and then realized how much those two kind of like converged
Yeah.
and like me not being enthusiastic about work or like intentional or like proud of it translated a lot into like me not being intentional in other areas of my life and then also not as self-sufficient and like supportive of myself internally
Yeah.
because like I think I was just at the end of the day not super proud or interested of that career path that I was on
Yeah.
and couldn't help but like see that as some sort of reflection of myself.
Yeah. And then it's like when like that's like your perception of yourself, that like the way that you were used to, it carries over into like the relationships you keep and like who you spend time with socially.
Yeah.
It's like also like, and I'm curious here, like, because I think you said like December was like kind of like a point in your life, which was like nice 3 or 4 months after now it'd be when you started to like realize like those, I guess like internal perspectives towards like career and all that, which I'm curious if you'd say that was the case, like December, that time frame. But also I feel like, I mean, I was the same way back a year ago, like when I just moved to my apartment in Brooklyn. I definitely had like this like burst of excitement and energy where I was like, oh, I've got like my own place now. I'm out in Brooklyn. I can like kind of be on my own, away from like the literal and figurative noise, and just like focus on creating, like making videos and all that. And I was very much in the mindset of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like really build out like my life here, and had no idea or could never envision that like a year later I'd be not living there, be back in my parents' place, like with no job, about to travel and start this next chapter and all that. It was the same thing where it was like I didn't have like a lot of the, I was like more like pressing internal conversations until like I just had to experience them, whatnot. Because like there's like this like big, I guess like in my case, like uptick from this like new quote unquote chapter of like being in Brooklyn and starting this phase like in my like creative path or whatever. That once I was like settled into that, the rest of like the monotony of like my 9 to 5 and like all that stuff like bled in.
Blood in what way?
Where it was just like, okay, now that I'm so much like I'm more established creatively, and also I mean to admit very honestly, like when I was like like what I was creating a year ago, like wasn't fully genuine or authentic to like what I would want to do now. And like once that sort of settled and like I got into like a steady state or like the kind of like the high wore off of the new chapter, then it was like the rest of what was being, I guess, like held back by that high came into like my, I guess, like more immediate attention, like the fact that like like the 9 to 5 still sucks or like is well unfulfilling to me, and then I still feel very constricted and like not free by working in this job that doesn't fulfill me, even though I am like still doing stuff that I like enjoy in this creatively and whatnot outside of that.
Yeah. Some or thoughts that come to my mind about that. And also, I guess, some non sequiturs, but come back to what we were saying before about like our first conversation, because I think that kind of like that brought back a lot of. I mean, we were talking a lot about like I guess, kind of purpose and meaning and
Yeah.
relationships, authenticity, kind of topics like that. And I think like some philosophy came up because that's just interest of mine, and I think we actually started talking about that originally because you said that you were reading some more philosophy, and then I guess just kind of remembering like a year ago, like the environments I was in, like I would say like are by no means they're by no means bad overall. It's just like they weren't right for me.
Yeah.
Where like the conversations I was having weren't conducive for of my interests.
Yeah.
So I started like further pushing them down, and like feeling like they were maybe like wrong to talk about because like I think often if you bring up something that you're excited about and you're met with just silence or like confusion, it's like very invalidating.
Yeah.
So like our friendship was very validating like as it began because we were talking about things that I am interested in, and I was like, oh shit, like someone else is really interested and values these things, which I think kind of started bringing those back up to the surface. And like once those were back in my conscience, it was hard to like put them away
Yeah.
when they're kind of just you say encroaching,
Yeah.
kind of approaching in on like my daily routine that I'd settled into.
Yeah.
It's like I can't really escape those anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only a few thoughts there. I do want to come back to like you taking a chance to like reflect on like all the past year, and like I guess like the more like immediate thought is like the internal and external environment, where it's like your external environment in terms of the conversations you're having and people you're with is definitely a reflection of like your inner one, which you were saying had been kind of like pushed down or oppressed for so long, which I definitely also have experience with that. But I think also just on a side note where it's not even like that we have, I mean, I think it's helpful that we have the same interests, which I think is important in any friendship, but it's more so that like we're genuinely like interested and like curious and like create this space for that where it's like we don't have to share the same interest, but we're actually like keen to hear about it because the other person is excited about it. Where to your point where it's like when you stop wanting to share that excitement, you rid yourself of the opportunity for someone to ask more about it. But also it's because a lot of people, it's like this like self-perpetuating cycle, I feel like, where it's like you repress what you're excited about because other people around you aren't, and like they've done the same with themselves because they've been in those environments, and it's like you just don't escape it.
I think that we've also talked about that idea of like filtering,
Yeah.
of like kind of filtering down certain or being in an environment where it's more filtered for your interests or like kind of things that are aligned with you, which I think is really important because like I do believe that like no matter what the environment is, like everybody has a potential to have a conversation with a certain amount of depth. It's just like maybe some people are held back a little bit more than others due to like X, Y, or Z situation, whether it's by their own kind of fault or not. But yeah, once I started putting myself in more of those environments, like our hangouts, and then just kind of subsequent ones with other people or like other environments that reminded me of my interests, I was like, oh shit, I feel a lot more confident when I'm in a place where I can express myself and my interests freely.
Okay.
And I'm, I guess just in general, like in an environment that's like more filtered for like learning or like authentic communication and connection. And like it's so frustrating being in an environment that's not as conducive of that because then you're like constantly being invalidated.
So would you say like the external came before the internal, or was it like simultaneous? Because you have the environments that you said you were getting like more a part of, and then like having realizations, which I feel like is like more inner.
I mean, I think it's both
Yeah.
in different ways. And I think that like one kind of draws on the other and like brings the other
Yeah.
out. So like, just I guess using our like first hangout as an example, it was just like kind of seeing that that type of conversation was possible again and on a different level too, was like a reminder of like that that's possible elsewhere too.
Okay.
So I guess in that regard, like that external validation of seeing someone else and like connecting, brought like internal validation too.
Okay. So do you feel like that paved the way for when you started to like question like your path and like purpose and so on and so forth? Because that was kind of leading into December.
Yeah, I think like subsequent hangouts for sure. Yeah, I remember in December I was staying at when I was staying at my friend's apartment until I moved in here. Just like kind of feeling very stagnated in my like job at the time, and like they were going through layoffs, but like in the process of kind of figuring it out. So like there was a lot of downtime, and yeah, it led me to a lot of thinking where I was like, I'm not doing anything here. Like, what am I doing in general? Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought, but it definitely did lead into that where I was just kind of thinking about where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and then also like I wasn't quite there yet, so I was also just thinking about what I ought to do, what I should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was like find another job in your case and all that, but
Yeah, and it was the right thing to do because like I found another job in a similar area and like took that and like I guess through a lot of invalidation, it validated that it wasn't the right area for me because like they were actually ended up being very similar. Whereas I was like, oh, maybe this first job, like the things I don't like about it are just unique to this one place. And then I was kind of able to piece together that this was going to be a common point of like discontent if I continued doing something similar and not pursuing something that was more like authentic to me and like relevant to my interests.
okay.
Yeah.
And I say that's the thing where it's like when there's what people are afraid of or avoid is the downtime, which is why people, especially like our age and like in New York, quote unquote, like work, hustle, or grind so hard is because they can avoid the downtime when it's like you're like forced to just like think about your thoughts and feelings towards where you are in life. And then when you realize like, oh shit, like I'm kind of stagnant or like I'm not like where I want to be or I'm not super excited, then it makes you take action. In that sense, like, yeah, like, I don't think anyone can, like, fault you for that. And, like, I mean, I was the same way where it's like you just take the next logical step, which is just, like, give it another shot. Because I don't think anyone, or, like, there's probably a very small amount of people who, like, have, like, I guess, like, the balls or, like, the courage to take a leap, like, as soon as, like, they experience something they don't like. It's like, you always want to give it, like, a second chance, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's like, the should. It's like, oh, I should, like, find another job. But for you, it's like you were able to evaluate that very quickly early on.
Yeah. Another thought there. It's escaping me now. Oh. Excuse me. I remember also in December, like with that all that downtime, I was like, oh, this is sick. Like I'm not barely working, but I'm getting paid. But like that wasn't really something I wanted to do, and then I reflected on that too, where I was like, I do want to do something. Like I like having my time occupied by doing something that means something to me, and like I've always been that way in school, too, where like if the topic or the class or the teacher interests me, like I very much apply myself and do a great job, and it's kind of something that I'm never not proud of because like I put everything on the table. And if it's not something I'm interested in, I'll probably put in no effort and like do a mediocre job. So I wanted to get to that place where I'm like passionate about something and doing something.
Yeah.
And then that kind of led into reflections of like, well, I'm basically just trying to avoid doing work because I'm uninterested in it just to get the paycheck.
Yeah.
Which isn't a great mindset to have when that aspect of maybe it would be a good mindset if it took up 2 hours of my day, but like when it takes up 8 hours, like basically the majority of my waking week, I felt like I should be thinking about some other way to spend my time.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember like being like my first job, I was like, oh word, I didn't have to work today. Or like I think I told you I would finish work early and just like not send it for a few hours.
Oh yeah.
It's just like I don't enjoy doing this. Like why would I like want to do more of it right now?
Yeah.
But then like to your point, like at that time I didn't have anything that I wanted to fill the time and the space with. I feel like that's kind of what played into a lot of like the dissonance for me when I was in my 9 to 5 was like now that I have what I enjoy, which is the creative work, and any downtime I had, I was like trying to get back to that. Like again, in like the 2 hours I wouldn't maybe send something, it was like, okay, let me just like use this time to like write a bit or like, you know, edit a video or something. And then having to like it's like code switch is the word. Like switch between that like multiple times a day was just exhausting.
Yeah, I had that experience too because like, I mean, starting remote work, like I would just open up like 5 tabs of like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, my email, like personal email, work email, some other stuff, and just constantly try to like justify me being there, I guess, by like also doing personal things at the same time, which like led to me just being extremely stressed out because like personal life was attached to remote
Yeah.
work, and yeah, the code switching was like not feasible on like my like brain.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I found interesting was like at my 9 to 5, which is like by all means like I guess a relatively more progressive company, and people were encouraging and like of like your outside pursuits. No matter what, it was always sort of like, oh, it's cool you do that, but don't talk about it or keep it like low key, which in itself is like a very like constraining environment, kind of like you talked about, where I felt like, you know, it's like even if I had like downtime and I was like in person, I would feel like I had to like hide what I'm doing as opposed to just like being openly, yeah, I've got nothing to do right now, so I'm just gonna like write a bit or like work on a video.
Yeah.
It's like I have to like pretend like I'm busy or doing something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's something interesting there about being encouraged to do stuff on your free time, but when you're like, at least this is for someone like me, when I was doing something that Tyler, when I was doing something that was fundamentally like against my like own beliefs and values, especially as I was growing them, it was just like how could I pursue the things that I care about in my free time when like during the 9 to 5 hours I'm doing something completely opposite to it.
Yeah.
It just seems like so fake and like it led to a lot of like I would say like self-hatred is too strong, but like self-dislike.
Okay.
Where I was just like it doesn't make sense to be that clashing and what I wanted to do. Yeah.
It's kind of like the imposter, I guess like sort of like imposter syndrome. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's like, if you worked at like an oil company,
Yeah.
but your passion is like the environment,
Yeah.
it's like, how could you balance those two
Yeah.
interests really? Or that'd be really hard, especially if you're very passionate about like the environment, like saving the planet, yet you're working at an oil company for the money or something like that.
Yeah.
It would lead to a lot of dissonance, at least for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I feel like also it's like that notion of like, oh, we're paying you to do this and to like, not do what you enjoy in your free time. So a lot of people, they're like, oh, it'd be easier for me to like not experience that dissonance because like that's what most of my waking life is like. It's like I'm spending it doing what I should do and like I'm paid to do like um, res- responsible for doing
Yeah.
and not like what I actually enjoy doing because like, that's not what is rewarded. And for a lot of people, like the reward is the money as opposed to like what is fulfilling to them.
Well, this is, I guess, something that we mentioned, or I mentioned before we started this. That I just, like a passing thought yesterday was like, just kind of imagining if I was in like a super high paying job right now, yet I felt no purpose or satisfaction or fulfillment in what I was doing. Like, and then I saw some alternative path where I was making a lot less or nothing, yet was feeling that purpose and fulfillment. Would I give that up? And like, at least where I am right now, and like, again, with a lot of like privileges as well, where like, you know, I'm okay in terms of like meeting ends meet, like comfortably. Like I would absolutely give that up because like, I guess what we were talking about before is like, I think having that amount of financial freedom or like wealth, the reason to have it really is to attain freedom
Yeah.
and be able to pursue something you care about or it's meaningful to you. And like, it's very hard to do that if that whatever is meaningful to you or brings you purpose is just a question mark. Like you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And in that regard, like I feel like the purpose of the money very much dissolves because if you're not using it for anything other than just like material acquisitions, which are also great, but like, you'll get bored of them
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you say that is like, I mean, it's easy. I mean, it's easy for both of us to say that, like, oh, we do something that like pays less because it's more. We'd rather take the more fulfilling thing, but we don't have that realization unless we do like the inner work. Which obviously for you to be able to say that, that's what it took.
Yeah.
Where I was in a similar spot where I left behind all that you described, but it wouldn't have happened. Like I can say that for a fact that it wouldn't have happened had I not been so solid internally that I was like, oh, I don't. Again, privileged to say, like I don't care about like the title or like the money and things like that. I'd rather be fulfilled. Where for many people, when they haven't done the inner work, that is not even like a remote thought. Like no one who hasn't done the inner work is thinking like, oh my gosh, like I would really like take a pay cut right now to do something that's more fulfilling.
Right.
Because like the greatest source of their validation is not internal, it's external. Like you said, like material stuff and all that. And then because their job is fueling all of that external validation, it's like, how could they let that up? Like they don't even realize that there's like another path or like want to think about another path.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like the having the status and the money should be for internal validation or to feel good about what you're doing or where you are, and when it doesn't, I feel like its meaning kind of dissolves.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that conversation we were having briefly last night about like just kind of observing people of our generation, like focusing very much on outer looks, and like this is probably just ubiquitous across all histories, but like
Yeah.
especially now since like we have access to like fast fashion and stuff like that, that people are like focused on making their appearance look a certain way so that they can be perceived a certain way rather than
Yeah.
like looking internally and saying like, who is this that I want to be?
Yeah.
Becoming comfortable with that themselves and then just projecting that naturally elsewhere.
Yeah.
Versus like dressing like an interesting person while not being one.
Yeah.
Which again isn't to like be on like a high horse of like,
Yeah.
some people are interesting, some people are not. Because like at least my worldview is that everybody has that same
Yeah.
potential in terms of like, I feel like actualizing who they are, which is everybody's different
Yeah.
in like a very beautiful way. It's just that some people haven't, some people have.
Okay. Yeah. I have a few thoughts. My own experience with that, which I think would be like a good opportunity for you to talk about, like the alignment, or like I guess maybe not alignment is the word. It's like what I was talking with Central yesterday, where I guess like oneness with yourself, where it's like where who you want to be and who you are one. They're not disjointed.
Wait, can you say that one more time? Who you want to be
And who you currently
are one.
They're one, not disjointed. And like this is just like a random tangent, but like Sencho was saying, where like alignment still indicates that there's like separation, because if things are aligned, they're like, aligned, but they're not together in a sense. So now I'm using the word like one or whatever.
That's cool.
So she got me there. But also I was gonna say, where I mean, I even think about like my own experience, like when I was still like out of college, like 2 years ago, right now, and I was still, again, just each their own. I just like buying like random stuff, like fake streetwear and stuff like that, or like I have like loafers that I only wear Birks now, but like I was buying like loafers that I've worn like twice because it was like, oh, like these look cool, and like, like it'd be nice to like wear these out or something, like with like a nice, like going to like, I don't know, like a bar, like a cocktail hour or something. And now it's just like, I wear the same clothes every day. I haven't bought clothes in like over a year. And it's more so just like when you're, not to sound like woo woo or like sagey, but it's like when you're more solid like in your internal world, it's like the external doesn't matter as much. And that bleeds over to everything, where it's like, and I guess like that's the whole point of minimalism, where it's like, oh, you're just comfortable with less because less is enough.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I don't need as many clothes or shoes. I don't need as much, like, again, privileged thing to say, like money, or I don't need this title that carries what it does with it. I don't need as many friends or relationships. Like, I'm fine with like what I have, because you have what's inside, that you bring that with you everywhere.
Yeah. Also, it's a lot cheaper to do that. That's just like a mindset switch. But like also like as someone that like I think I'm very much like predisposed to like be susceptible to like consumerism or like consumer messages, and I like love buying like gadgets and like the piano keyboard.
Yeah.
Although like what I intend to do with it, I think will be fun and cool. But and like I also love shopping or like looking cool or whatever. But again, like I feel like personally I don't have any illusions that like that's what's gonna make me interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That like showing up, people are gonna be like, wow, like he's got a cool like
cool shirt or like cool shoes.
Yeah, like he must be an interesting person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like to me, I guess I feel like it's very fun to like dress well, like so that you like how you look.
Yeah.
Like I think I look cool. Like I'll go out and look this way. Versus, I don't know.
This is random, but like it's kind of interesting. Where like, for example, my senior year of college, like my birthday, which is like my 22nd. Very sweet of like my roommate and my friends. They all like pulled together and got me like a like nice Hermes leather bracelet, which is like way more expensive than it should be. It's just like a black leather bracelet, and now it's just like I have this like, I don't even know why I started wearing this. Just like a random like beat up like hair tie that I picked up because I'm like, I don't need one. It's just like I just have it as an accessory, and like what is it? It's also just a black loop around my wrist. It just doesn't have a silver H as a buckle.
Yeah, that's funny. Damn, I thought that hair tie was Hermes. The Hermes beaten up hair tie.
Yeah. It's like it's beaten up on purpose to give it like that vintage or worn look.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for that because I have my New Balance shoes that have that are purposely like chopped up and deconstructed.
Oh really? That's like actually a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wore them yesterday. They're like cut out. I think they're really cool. I have one like good friend that like just saw them and he was like, God, you suck. Why would you buy that? I was like, I don't know. I think they're cool.
It's like distressed denim that is like already distressed.
Yeah.
Or like I would buy like, whenever I'd buy like white shoes. I remember like really remember doing this. Like I'd buy white shoes and just like throw them in the dirt and just like try to get them like more like worn up or beat up. It's like just like plain white shoes. They're just like, oh shit, they're like looks too clean.
Yeah.
That's a random tangent, but
That's really funny.
yeah,
Yeah, and also like I feel like talking about this, like I don't mean to say that people don't have the thoughts of like improving their internal self, because like everyone does, I think. It's just like, to me, I'm like, it's so much more interesting to hear like what cool, interesting thought someone had, which I think the problem is that a lot of people don't validate themselves and like say like, this is an interesting or worthwhile thought to share, or part of me that's worthwhile sharing.
Yeah.
When like everything that they think should be.
Yeah.
And instead, like, it's more of a focus on their outer appearance or like kind of material, superficial things.
Yeah.
When like what I would just love to hear and like impresses and wows me is not like some like grandiose accomplishment, or like, I guess that could be the more superficial abstract thing, and superficial practical would just be like clothing.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want to hear like a cool thought that someone has, or
Yeah.
like something cool that they were like interested or like really into this week.
Yeah.
That was like about them.
Yeah.
Because I think that like from an outsider perspective, like having this kind of conversation can come across as like maybe like high and mighty, like kind of obnoxious, like talking about it. But like really like what I'm trying to get at is just like, it's cool to just meet people and like hear about their lives authentically.
Yeah.
And like their experiences and their honest and like genuine thoughts. And like likewise, I hope that I'm able to present myself to other people authentically too. So that I'm not like kind of bullshitting, but
Yeah. A few thoughts there where it's like, just like sharing your true self and like not who you think you should be. Where it's like, this is a random example. It's like, if you thought Barbie sucked, just say Barbie sucked.
yeah,
And like you don't have to say, oh yeah, it was solid, just because everyone else does. And then it's like, if you think it sucks, then I want to hear why it sucks.
yeah,
Like, don't just say it sucks. Like, actually, like, give me your true thoughts, because like you're allowed to have those. But also to your point where it's like so many people struggle to validate themselves because the way we grow up and like the environments we're in are like so devalidating. And it's hard too. It's like, I recognize the difficulty of this, as like, both you and I experience, where oftentimes you do sort of depend on someone else to model for you or like to validate your thoughts and like your feelings. But then it's like, do you become dependent on that, which many people are, whether it's in the form of like friends, romantic partners, family, whatever, or do you learn to like give that to yourself? And yes, it takes like someone else to model that for you. And for me, it was like people I watched or books I read, and like doing that over time helped me do so, which I could start doing for other people. But so I'm curious for you, like, how has that relationship or journey been for you, like to like learn how to, or like reteach yourself how to validate yourself?
yeah. I think that's a interesting topic, and like something that's, I think, relatively new for me, because like this was big when we went to Mexico, kind of like you.
Yeah.
Planting those seeds in my head about like validating myself, forgiving myself for things that I used to like kind of hate myself for, congratulating and advocating for myself. Like yesterday, like running the half marathon,
Yeah.
like my internal voice was like, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like, you got this. Like, this is a great accomplishment that you're even doing it.
Yeah.
Versus like 3 years ago, kind of embarrassing to say this, but like working out and doing something hard, I'd be like, come on, you lazy piece of shit, or something like that.
Yeah,
Where it's like, what an awful thing to say
Yeah.
to myself to motivate me, versus just saying something nice that's like, it is a great accomplishment whether I completed it or not, which I did.
Yeah.
But so yeah, like I think that's kind of a new thing and like very important about like, especially like on a path to be more self-reliant, is like, if I love something or I'm proud of something, like allowing myself to be proud of it and love it, whether
Yeah.
or not someone else does.
Yeah.
And obviously like the right people will.
Yeah.
Like there's certain friends, family and stuff like that will validate that with me.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like that doesn't mean anything if when you still go home, you're like, I feel nothing about that.
Yeah.
There was something else that I read in like a text recently, kind of about that, like a friend is, I think, for like sharing things of like, I'm gonna barely remember what this was about, but like a friend is for like sharing interesting thoughts and like life experiences and perspectives. It's not for validation as much. And like obviously validation, I guess, has its, I wouldn't take the extreme side of that. Like, I think validation has its merits.
Oh, yeah.
But like, I think a true or good friendship isn't built upon me showing up and seeing you and being like, do I look good today? Like, am I
Yeah.
cool? Like, do you think I'm smart? Like, stuff like that. It's like, those things you should kind of master on yourself. Or by yourself.
Yeah. A few thoughts there. Well, when I resonate with that, where it's like, I mean, you were literally saying earlier where it's like, to be fair, we probably won't see each other for a while, but you're not sad about it, or like what? And like neither am I, where people be like, what? Like you're not sad? It's like no, like there is like that bit of sadness, or whatever. But also it's like, apart from the fact that we will still like be talking regularly because we have that foundation built, it's also like in the sense that like we don't need each other.
Yeah.
Which that's the point of validation, which I think people get lost on, where it's like everyone needs validation. Like everyone needs validation, and it's more so like how much do you depend on it from other people. And if you're able to give more of it to yourself, then you don't need as many like other people to do it. Like, do I need a validation? Like, yeah, fuck yeah, I need a validation. I validate myself all the time though. So it's like if I'm around the world and I don't know a single soul, I'm good because I still have myself to validate me. Whereas like I don't need to, like your point, call you and be like, hey, like how am I doing? Or like, like literally how am I doing? Or, like, how do I look? Blah blah. It's like no, like I'm feeling sad or like I'm experiencing like frustration, whatever. And it's like I don't need you to like help me work through that. And it's like we talked about this where it's like I read this in like another place where I'm not going to get into because I feel it's like too much down a rabbit hole for some people, but it's like, yeah, you don't need people. People are like, what the fuck? Like you don't need people? It's like, no, you don't. It's like not that you don't need people, but it's like when you're relying or like dependent, which like people talk about all the time, like codependency, where if you're codependent on somebody and like you need them for like validation as much as you need like air and water to live, then is that really an unconditional or like loving relationship? Because like you are relying on them to show up for you in a certain way, and it's like if that's there, it's like how can you survive without it? Just how, as much as you can't survive without water or air, and it's like is that really a friendship or like true relationship? Which like I've experienced myself, and like I've seen a lot of people fall into. It's like that's not the case. Like people like they're dependent on others.
Yeah, I guess the two branching thoughts that come to mind. One, like I think asking questions like how am I doing is just like asking someone else questions that they can't answer. It's like I can give you my perspective, but at the end of the day, like I have no view into your internal world other than the one that you present to me, which is imperfect at best. And then I don't know if this is too much of a leap to make, but like I guess relying on someone else and like not and seeing it as like I can't function without them is kind of similar to a lot of people's perspectives with employment too.
Yeah.
Or what they're doing, which is like their identity is tied is tethered to something or someone else. And like if that thing or person is removed, they're like I think their ego is threatened and like perceives death. And like, you know, I think you start to feel feelings of like death where you're like, holy shit, like I need to scramble and like hang on to these things. Versus having a more detached relationship with that where you know like I'm okay whether no matter what the external circumstances and how they change, because realistically, and I think you talked about like this notion of like surrendering, like we have no idea what is going to happen to us on any given day, and we have very little control over that unless we're just going to like hole up in our apartments, which isn't super interesting, but I fall victim to sometimes. And forget my initial tangent, but I guess like just kind of surrendering to what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I guess to build off that, so you don't learn to surrender until you are comfortable internally.
Yeah.
Because if you're not comfortable internally, you're trying to fight both at the same time. It's like you grasp perfect control at your external environments when, like that you said, that's the last thing you can control or manage. Like the only thing you truly carry with you everywhere is yourself and your internal, space and whatnot that you have.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's like most people aren't like that, where they don't have like their internal worlds or environments in check. And then they're afraid of like what happens externally. It's like, oh, I'm afraid if I leave my job, or I'm afraid if like my partner leaves me, or I'm afraid if like my friend moves or something, because they don't trust themselves internally to navigate any of that.
It's like to go back on Barbie, which you mentioned a couple minutes ago.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like the ending of it with like, you're not Ken and Barbie, like you're just Ken.
yeah,
Like I think that's very pertinent to this conversation with both work and relationships too, where it's like, because I had that draft that I never published about like AI and work,
yeah,
and like, it is not the end of the world or death if like a partner or a friend leaves you, or you get fired, or you quit, or you're out of a job, because like you should be Dennis just by
yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
And like you should be Dennis at the job too, and like in the relationship, like it's just Dennis and you happen to be there doing something.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus like Dennis the banker,
Yeah.
Dennis the boyfriend. Because like if that is your identity, then like it does feel like your world
yeah.
is collapsing when those
Yeah.
things kind of leave.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people struggle because like maybe if you get fired or you quit, like you lose your sense of self because you don't know
Yeah.
as much about who you are outside of those environments. But like the reality is like every single person is someone
Yeah.
interesting before they ever worked or got to know someone, and like long after they will too. It's just like a matter of like tapping into it, having the patience and like the courage and the confidence to like
Yeah.
listen to yourself and like slowly learn more about like who you are and what things you like, no matter how like trivial they are.
Yeah, yeah. I have a few thoughts there, but you've talked about, and I'm curious to hear your, again, like, I want to hear more about like as you reflect on this past year, like your own journey to like, you've used this in the past few days, like becoming more whole.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, yeah, it's like if you are your whole self, you just bring your whole self to everything you're, engaged in, whether it's a relationship or work or whatever. And it's not like part of yourself is attached, dependent on like work or a relationship, where it's like, oh, if I'm not in proximity with this or connected with this at all times, like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
And this is like a random thought that popped up where it's like, maybe this is not the greatest metaphor or visualization, where it's like, for example, we graduate from school, we get a diploma. I've like thought I lost mine because like I just never took it out of the packaging because I was like, it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Like this piece of paper says like graduated from college and like whatever. And like I literally thought like I lost. I was like, oh shit. All right, I don't have a diploma anymore.
It means you have to go back to school and do it again.
I know. It's like I didn't go, but it's like in my sense I was like, all right, cool, like whatever. I don't know where it is, but if I don't have it, great. If I do, great. It doesn't really matter to me. But codependency or all that is like, oh shit, I don't have my diploma. I'm not educated anymore. Like I'm not smart or like worthy or whatever. I need to prove myself by having this piece of paper that I can frame up.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. And like, what was your question before? Was how I'm keeping that wholeness?
I'm just curious to hear about like, again, as you reflect a year ago, I feel like it's like safe to say that you weren't whole.
Yeah.
And like obviously we're never like I don't think we ever reach a point where we are like we're constantly like figuring that out and like where we are in that. But like relatively speaking, is you feel more whole now.
Yeah, I think also just I think as you're saying, like it's a lifelong journey, and every single piece that you create there is just like invaluable as you get more and more so, even if it's never fully constructed. I mean, I guess one thought that just comes to mind is like, was that 2 days ago? It was my like first day like at my new job teaching, and like just kind of orientation and like meeting people, and it was in many ways just like a fantastic day, like meeting a lot of like-minded people in like a place that I feel very comfortable in for a multitude of reasons. But like I did feel an inner kind of comfort knowing that like when I was there, like I was the same me that I am elsewhere with friends. It was like I brought in my interests, my curiosities, and my like, I guess, honesty and authentic interests, and like that made all the world and like difference being there.
Yeah.
Where, like I was conversing with people and like actually expressing who I am. And I don't know, being able to do that is just like, I feel like it's a deep inner confidence that's like it's not related to the job, even though it is. Like I happen to be in that filtered environment where I'm around people that, and in an environment that I think allows me to do that, which was in many ways the ultimate goal. But also like, I think no matter how that day had played out, I would have expressed myself the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A few thoughts there, but it's like when you're so solid internally, then like the environments here and only elevate or empower that more. It's like you don't need it, but like it's just like elevates everything.
Yeah, and there's also like certainly environments that don't empower or elevate it, but I don't think, maybe it like chips away a little or like makes me frustrated.
Yeah.
But at least recently, like by no means has like really destroyed my self-confidence or like point of self-worth. It was more just like that was frustrating and like I'd like to be in a different environment than that.
Exactly, yeah.
Versus like, oh my God, that sucked. Like it threatened my identity. Like
Yeah.
I didn't feel like myself, like all this stuff. It was just like, no, I was myself there. It just didn't necessarily fit. Like kind of like a puzzle thing. Like I guess my whatever part of the puzzle I am didn't fit in that situation, whereas it might in another one.
Yeah.
It's not good or bad. It's just not the right environment.
Yeah. And it's like the moments and the environments where it's like how you show up how you show up as yourself, where it's like, to be fair, it's like you can be in those environments like I was in my 9 to 5 where it's like, is it conducive to me like showing up fully all the time? But it's like, no, but in the moments that like maybe someone asks a question, I'm not gonna like back down and like not show my whole self. But also I think one question that I have for you is like, you mentioned like feeling that deep sense of confidence. So how would you describe how you feel now as you go through your day to day, just being yourself, as opposed to where you were a year ago last August?
I mean, it's
hard to describe, kind of.
Yeah, it's one. It's hard to describe because like every day is different, and like so much of our day is just routine, where like you're not thinking or like as aware of stuff. And then I also want to like I guess preface that like obviously like life is still imperfect, which like it always will be, and like there's frustrations and self-doubt that still come into my mind. But I think in general, like I am more proud of myself and like happy with who I am in terms of like personally for me, like philosophy is a big interest, and I'm like my days are more structured around reading and learning about philosophy and other kind of topics related. And just like that in and of itself is like something that's very nice to me, where I'm like, oh, this is part of who I am now. It always has been, but like I'm actualizing it. Whereas in the past, it wasn't as much. It was kind of in the recesses of my mind.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's probably the most marked difference, is just like actively doing more of the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
And not feeling as pressured to do the things that I want to do less.
Okay.
And like I think last year I felt definitely less in control, where I was like, I know I have these interests, but I'm not pursuing them. So I'm kind of mad at myself for not doing that.
Yeah.
And I find myself showing up to a lot of things that I know I don't want to spend as much time at, and I'm still doing it anyways.
Yeah. And I guess that's a good point, which I'll ask a question about, where it's like action precedes feeling, where it's like, I really think like the feeling and how you are and like the growth shows in like the little moments, which we talked about, like, and I'm curious to hear like what are some examples of things that you do now that embody this like more holistic self, and like what things that you've left behind that weren't as much. Because those really show like the growth and like internal shifts that you've made over the past year.
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that right now. Like practical kind of things, like day to day.
Yeah. If you want me to like, I can think of some.
Yeah, you go ahead, and then maybe that'll spark.
Like I think of like, I would say for me, just like little things that seem so like ordinary, but really they're like a much deeper rooted decision, where I guess like one is when I stopped drinking, and when I went out at the time, I would go out and just not drink. And it's like, that wasn't like like he's trying to quit alcohol or like blah, blah, blah. It's just like, no, like I just don't value this, and like just who I am as a person. Yeah. Now that like they're like, at least at the time I was like working towards becoming more whole, and like, what's the word? Like that was just a natural byproduct of that. I just stopped drinking. I stopped going out. Yeah. But I was still able to just be my whole self when I was there. Or like things like, starting to like let go of certain friends. Or be like, if I have a question that some people might perceive as like, oh, that's like too like deep or too vulnerable, I just ask it. because I'm not like, oh fuck, are they gonna think like I'm like weird or like coming on too strong by asking that? It's like, no, I just ask it, like little things like that. And my last thing here is where it's like, it's kind of funny where I feel like people get this idea that like, it's like, oh, like those videos where it's like, how to be more charismatic, how to be more confident, and there's like different steps, or like they're like using examples of people of like how to be like more. It's like, oh, like he's being more charismatic and confident right now because you can see how he's like, you know, like making eye contact. He seems like very relaxed in his chair or whatever, blah blah blah. But it's like that's like none of that is like anything of like what charisma or confidence is. It's just how one your internal environment or like how solid you are internally, which carries into your external actions.
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise, like, if you're just following those steps, I feel like you're more acting than living.
Yeah, and people are always like, oh, like, fake it till you make it, or like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you're just always, like, you're literally just going to continue to fake it. You never make it because you're always faking it.
Yeah. Your answers, I guess, sparked my kind of mind. I think that's something that, what was the original question? Like doing things more intentionally or more, or
It's
what's
like,
different?
what are some examples of actions that you now do, like just regular ones, that indicate a more, like, united or like one, like, internal environment?
I'd say like in the going out kind of category, like I'm someone that's still like I enjoy going out and like you know having like a couple drinks too. But I think for a long time I kind of was aware that I just prefer like sitting and talking while I'm there and like, you know, connecting with friends or having fun, like joking around, but like hearing each other and like actually being able to talk. So like purposely avoiding places that are like super loud, clubby, dancing places with covers, expensive drinks, and you can't hear anyone. Those are just like, that's one of those situations that's not filtered in any way.
Yeah.
Where it's like not conducive for me to speak to my own friends, let alone meet any interesting people. And also it's just expensive and like basically like your probability of spending more money or like drinking too much or just kind of tied in there. So that's something I no longer feel really pressured to do, and kind of in the opposite, I'm like kind of firm about not doing,
Yeah.
which is really nice. And like, I think it's been making me enjoy my free time and like time spent out with friends during the evenings a lot nicer. Cause like there's a bar around the corner that like has board games. That's like great. Just like get one drink or no drinks and just like play board games with friends. It's just like exactly like what I'd want to do on like a Friday or Saturday. And like maybe you could meet people, maybe you're just playing with your friends. I think also just kind of further expressing my opinions honestly. Like if someone's talking about a certain topic, like I'm probably going to assert my opinion if it's an environment that I want to. I think talking about work is a big one because like now I'm comfortable doing that. And then just like there's some general things that like I think choosing a life of less, which is just like, you know, going away from the corporate work towards teaching.
Yeah.
Like I'm making less money in the long run, or at least the short run. And that has just kind of like, I guess maybe by pressure or like force of pressure, but like honestly, it's just something I like doing. Like I'm cooking more.
Yeah.
I'm like buying thrift books and using my Kindle and being more conscientious and less wasteful, which are just like all nice things to do.
Yeah.
And they all like tie into the my like kind of greater purpose of like, well, I want to be doing this thing, and like in order to do it, I'm gonna have to live a life of less, and also living a life of less is quite enjoyable.
Yeah. I think also to that point where it's like people might view that as like a constraint, but it's like not. Where it's like it's just like it's freeing if anything, and like you just like don't mind doing that, and that comes from like being more solid internally, where you're not relying on stuff externally. Random thought here, and then I have another one where it's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting where like when people drink or like use any sort of substance, it's to, like, to be honest, like try to be more themselves, but then like they're still not themselves because like, they're still like, you know, maybe like, they'd rather be playing board games, but now they're like at a bar or a club, and like maybe they're expressing themselves in like a little bit more freely in one way, but they're still not totally whole.
Yeah, I guess one kind of thought that pops in there is just like I think being younger, it was more of an appeal to like drink more and like, you can kind of escape yourself more.
Yeah.
And like now, while I'm feeling a little bit more, or definitely more comfortable with who I am, that idea of like, having 4 drinks instead of 3 is like losing some control over who I am. And like, I really don't want to right now. Cause like when I go out, I want to like have a great conversation and like be present during it and listen and remember it and like have fun.
Yeah.
Versus kind of losing that presence or consciousness. Yeah, it's nice to want to like generally stay more grounded in reality.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You mentioned that word like control, where it's like the opposite of control is like free, and then it's like people, drink or use a ton of substances because they've been living lives where like they feel so controlled or constrained, like shoulds and all that, that they just like want to like let it out in like the most like extreme way possible.
It's also like kind of ironic because like as you mentioned, like it sort of becomes a prison too, because like if you're hungover the next day,
Yeah.
like there goes half your day, and like you're also probably more anxious, like anxiety.
Yeah.
And like you don't have the headspace to think about stuff. You probably feel a bit like worse about yourself just naturally because like your body is unhealthy. Like
Yeah.
if I have a really unhealthy meal, I tend to think a little worse about myself for that day.
Yeah.
Which like ends up limiting you from having the freedom to like really think about things or do the things that you want to do or express yourself. Again, that's on an abstract level. That's for whoever listens to this. That's
Sure.
by all means not X night drinking, but it's more of a constant pattern of
Yeah.
not a lack of intentionality.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm curious, like, how do you feel going into like this next chapter? Because I know like, that's something we've talked about where you felt like it's been like an in between, and like when you quit and like got into your program and started taking these steps, and like still kind of waiting for like that actual start of like actually again like action, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about just now and before, where it's like it takes like actually doing the thing to like start to feel like, yes, you are one or like whatnot.
I'd say like I think I feel very grateful. Like I guess on Friday just being back at my school that I once went to and now I'm teaching at, being around familiar faces and then new ones that have a lot of shared values was just something I'm like very grateful for, and I think it's going to take a while to like settle in that that's a norm. And I think that I'm likely to have a similar experience with my program. And it's just it very much feels like a blessing to be in a place where people are having those similar thoughts and like care about similar things.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna like add a lot to like having a sense of community
Yeah.
and belonging. And I'm also just grateful for myself for like getting there and like doing that, and then grateful for friends and family that have supported me
Yeah.
throughout that too. So I think that's like kind of a resounding feeling in my head, and then also just excited for like what's to come with it.
Yeah.
I think I'm nervous too because like, inevitably there's going to be challenges or maybe something bad happens because that's just like how life is. And like, I'm like, God damn it, I don't want this to happen about something that feels so like serene and like promising right now. But like, that'll be part of it. And I'm confident that I'm equipped to, or I know I can deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess I want to pose that question back to you as you are in a little bit over a week and a half, 2 weeks away from leaving the United States.
Yeah. I'll answer, I guess, a couple thoughts there where it's like, I mean, how awesome is that for you to be able to say out loud, like, oh, I know I can like handle like the ups and the downs.
Yeah.
And I think that's like something that like, it sounds so simple, but really that's what everyone deep down wants to get to a place at, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I'm not afraid of like what happens in life. I can just like let go of control to it and surrender to it.
Yeah.
Which like I think that's like the biggest testament of like the work that you've done internally, which is fair to say like a year ago was not there. And then because you've done like all that internal work, it's like all like the stuff that you're saying like now like it's stuff that you probably never envisioned or like you like maybe like dreamt about or like had like passing thought about, but now like a year later it's reality, which is I hope it's awesome for you to be able to acknowledge that as well. But yeah, I guess like how like similarly it's kind of been like the same thing where by the time I do leave in like 2 weeks, I'll have been like I guess like unemployed for like I've kind of been like at home for like by then for like a month and a half, 6 weeks, unemployed for a little over longer than that, and it's been kind of like this thing that I've been talking about. It's like, oh, I'm gonna like travel and like create and do all that, but I haven't necessarily started doing it yet. But so in that sense, I'm excited to actually start because I think I've had, enough time at home and like just all that to do otherwise. But yeah, I'm excited, and similarly, it's like I don't have any idea of like what's to come, but like I've always like said where it's like I'm cool with not knowing, and like that's like what the exciting part about life is I don't know what comes next, because again it's like even for both of us where it's like a year ago could I have envisioned that I'd be sitting here? I mean, even talking to you when it wasn't even like a thought or a possibility. Quitting, traveling, same for you, like quitting, starting school and like going to teaching, it's like wasn't even a possibility. So you can't try to predict anything, but just trying to let go of control and also just like again being confident that you are able to figure things out as they come. So in that sense, like yeah, I'm just excited. I can't predict what I'll be doing, where I'll be, how I'll feel a year from now, but I know that it's gonna be awesome. Because like sitting here a year ago, awesome place to be, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
With you and whatnot.
From a friend's perspective too, I admire that, like, as I've asked you more about kind of the short-term plans for your travels and stuff, like not having many immediate ones, yet having that faith and excitement for it is really cool to watch. Just because like you have that trust and you also an inner confidence that this is the right thing to do, and that great things are going to come from it regardless. Also, on less important of a question, and like knowing that I think you prefer not to prescribe to labels.
Sure.
But what will, in a month, like, on Friday, I'm like, I guess I'm a teacher now.
Yeah.
In a month, what will you be?
In a month, will I be?
Like once you're living it, because like right now
Sure.
it's like it's theoretical.
Okay, sure. I guess this is the question of like, oh, what do you do? Like, if I get asked by someone like, what do you do? It's just like my cheesy answer is like, I'm just being myself.
Yeah.
It's I don't prescribe anything to like being myself, but like, I guess if I like had to say like, oh, like what am I doing in terms? I'm just like, I don't know, just like exploring, creating. That's it.
I like just like a response like I'm Dennis.
Yeah.
And then also like I'm a traveler, because I feel like the word traveler has it can be both physical and kind of like emotional or mental. Which is cool. Like as you're traveling.
Yeah. I guess the word is like explorer.
Yeah.
Where it's like, not to sound like super profound, but like, exploring the external world to ultimately explore the internal. Where like the way that I think I've described to you, where it's like, I travel not to like, take pictures or do anything different. It's like, I just want to experience different inputs, like the environments that I'm in, and then explore how those, impact me, or like how I feel about those internally, and just like share that with people. And that's it. It's like there's no like grandiose plan for like, yeah, I'm gonna be like a podcaster, I'm a YouTuber, or like I'm like a traveler. It's like whatever. It's just like, I'm just like myself, and like myself just likes doing these things. I don't know if like you can label. It's like you can label it how you want. That's just how I am.
What about like a sports car owner, like
a sports car owner
having a Lambo and a Ferrari? When's that coming?
I'm a Lambo dad or something. Can you imagine?
Also, like I think obviously like it works both ways, where you're exploring the external world to explore internal, and vice versa. Where like you've shown me a lot of your journal entries, which are also in your like newsletter and videos, and like I feel like it's you have, since whenever you started like journaling consistently, like you've brought those words out of the pages. And,
yeah.
You are you've been living them
Yeah.
since, which is just pretty cool to think about. Is that like as you reflect on your journal entries that you often share, like those aren't just ideas, like they are your reality.
Yeah. I mean, also to that point, I'll say it's like, it's literally coming from the deepest subconsciouses, like, or like recesses of like who we are. It's like those are like the complete, real, quote unquote, you, whatever you want to call that, that comes out. There's like no should. It's like, no, like I should like work this job or I should like, you know, make some more money. It's like, these are like my deepest like wants and desires and like my thoughts and whatnot. And it's like, now those are reality. It's like, that's the thing where it's like, that's like why I think writing and like just self-expression is so important, where being able to put those into some sort of medium and like being able to look back on it, that's done like wonders for like my faith and belief in the uncertainty. Is like all this stuff that I've talked about, I've like put on word, like on paper, is real. It's kind of like magic or whatever. It's like now it's like the more that I've like gone back and like reflected on that, which is like why I do that, and I read through old stuff so often, is to be able to like see how like dreams or imagination become real. And like now, like it's interesting, like I don't know like when the shift was, but like now when I write, I like consciously catch myself where I'm like, oh, I can't believe like this is happening, or like, you know, like you know, I don't want to like believe that I could end up with someone who's like these qualities, but now I'm like, you know, I'll be like, no, Dennis, like, you know, you have no fucking idea what's going on, but no matter what happens, it's going to be something awesome because everything has been awesome, like that you would have never expected.
It's like the the first Lego movie theme is everything is awesome.
Oh really? Oh yeah, no, you're right.
Everything
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's like it kind of, I guess this is parting thought, so we can get our
Yeah,
our
sure.
walk in. But I feel like you've collapsed the disconnect between dreams and reality,
Oh yeah.
and I think we've conversed about this too. That like, or at least this is a personal observation for me, is that in the past, a dream was something kind of grandiose and something hypothetical and kind of like
Yeah.
fairy tale, and like now, is this one of your titles to something, like living the dreams or living the questions?
Living the questions. Yeah.
The new
Yeah.
letter, but it's very cool and rewarding to be living like the dreams,
Yeah.
and like, you know, they aren't grandiose and they're like quite simple, but like it's also like really, I don't know, it feels really good, like
Yeah.
when instead of just like kind of dreaming of like, oh, one day, it's like, no, like that's now.
Yeah.
And like I think I've reflected on that a lot, just like, you know, the finite nature of like our existence.
Yeah.
Like if not now, like when? Like
Yeah.
we may as well start doing this now. Like
Yeah.
me getting like the piano keyboard. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I gotta like, I want to get back into it. Like I
Yeah.
want to play some piano, like play some music, like,
Yeah.
you know, read some books, try to do some, you know, weird things I've never done, like
Yeah.
weird to me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I've just kind of like flirted with the idea of like dancing classes, acting
Yeah. Oh,
classes.
yeah, no,
just to
definitely.
try them. Like,
Definitely.
I don't particularly think I'll be great at it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. You could play like a corporate bot. You don't need classes to do that. I definitely don't need classes to do that.
that's good. That's a good joke.
Yeah,
I like that.
Thanks. A couple of thoughts there, but it's like, I mean, how empowering is that for you to say? Where it's like, again, like these thoughts of like becoming a teacher, which I'm sure you've had before even like graduating from college and all that. It's like all these years later, they're gonna be real. Like they are real, and that's why I think it's like it's so awesome. Where it's like people think of like dreams, like you said, as like kind of like this like far away thing, or like this like, oh, it'd be cool if, but like, dreams come from like a real place. And I think if people just like took their dreams more seriously, i.e., take themselves more seriously, it's crazy like what things can happen in your life. And like you don't have to do anything like quit your job or like, you know, I don't know, start a company or whatever. It's just like if you just like take your dreams like a little bit more seriously and just like follow that, like you don't know where you'll end up.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like it's where you're meant to, not where you feel like you should. Because it's like if you're not excited talking about, to your point, your life, then what are you doing? And like I've written about that, where it's like if you're not like it's like you're only excited when you talk about your dreams. Like you're not excited talking about like working in an oil company or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like that's how life, at least I'm biased, I think it should be. And yeah, I mean that's what I'm excited for now, where it's like what is going to be real in a year from now. So I guess like parting question about, but it's like what are like some open-ended questions you have for yourself that a year from now you'll have an answer to? You'd like to have an answer to, or some form of it?
That's so hard. I think, I guess, right now just being like, Sebastian, like you have a lot of interests. Which ones are you going to choose to dive into more deeply?
Sure.
Because I think that, eventually, like, I don't have enough time to pursue every single one to the kind of extent that
Yeah.
I'd like to.
Yeah.
And I think that this next year will be pretty important for me to kind of figure out which are the ones I care about more,
Yeah.
as related to like learning, teaching, helping people,
Yeah.
and then like other just like creative pursuits for fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I guess, and we could do the same. But like, I guess I'll have a question for you, which is like, how will your sort of pursuit of teaching kind of shake out? Where it's like, I'm curious, like, where your sentiments will be in terms of like, oh, is teaching going to be like, am I going to pursue like the route of teaching where I'm like literally in a classroom teaching? Because by then you'll have done it for a year or so, and you'll have been in like the classroom. Or is teaching going to be more of like a catch-all sort of thing, where it's like, you're a teacher, but like teaching can be done through like writing.
Yeah.
It can be done through like whatever other medium calls you of like the interest that you just described.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Similarly for me, I'm in a similar boat where I feel like right now I'm like starting a lot of things where like even a year ago, I was just quote unquote a YouTuber just doing YouTube, and that's like what I thought I would be. But now it's turned into, again, totally unexpected, but a newsletter, like starting a separate blog, starting like a podcast in a sense, like doing like comics and illustration, where it's like, do I realistically have enough time in the day to do every single one like meaningfully? No, but like I'll probably do some combination of them throughout the course of my days or weeks, and it's really a matter of like which ones like resonate with me the most at that time, because like who knows, like I could potentially have stopped making YouTube videos, I could potentially not do like the illustrations and all that. So that's my question for myself.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that as well. I have some questions for you, but I don't want to rush them.
Sure.
I think speaking of our conversation of dreams, the outro to this podcast should be from your hometown hero Meek Mill, Dreams and Nightmares.
What is, wait, okay, well I know that, but like, what is,
You don't remember it?
wait, what is it? It's like,
Remember we were walking down.
no, I know, but like, what is like, I don't even remember.
There's like piano. It goes into it.
Oh, right, but like, oh man, here's a random one. I guess like, how many times will I get food poisoning? I've got,
That'd be brutal. At the end of the year, you come back and you're just like, the majority of my travel was spent like bedridden.
yeah,
Sick.
yeah,
One open-ended, or probably close-ended question for you is, which country will you find the most comparable protein French toast ingredients in to the U.S., and will it be better than your Costco haul?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I'll miss that for sure. Huh. All right, should we wrap it up?
Let's do it.
Nice.